All right, now everybody can hear us. Just so you know. And here we are with Hammered Out. Let's go ahead and begin with that tidbit of information.
Look, factory warranty on my vehicle is about to expire. Excuse me for a second. I need to go deal with this emergency. Let me tell you, the first time that I found that I just got that call, guys. Chat, I'm sorry, deal with me for a second because I'm about to rant. Because I was in fucking high school, okay, and I would get this call constantly on my cell phone. I didn't even have a car, and the factory warranty on my vehicle was about to expire. Like, I don't know how that happened, but apparently the factory warranty on the vehicle that I had no clue what was about to expire. I want to just call them back and find out where my car is.
I'll be perfectly honest though. As soon as Progressive Liberal, when he responded to that, for those in the live chat who don't know, he responded very sincerely to that. Oh, do you need to go? And my brain, the rusty cobweb filled gears in my brain immediately just skirted out the worst response to that. They just went, okay, boomer. But
okay, boomer is my favorite.
It's mine too.
One of the best things was at the end at Anime Weekend Atlanta, hearing the voices of Dragon Ball Z Abridged just ribbing on each other, and then when Lanny Bator said something just off the cuff, Kaiser just turns around to him and just goes, "Okay, boomer," and just. The audience was divided. Half of them laughed their ass off. The other half were just like, "Oh, nope, it's time to cringe."
Yeah. That's the proper response to "Okay, boomer." So,
it is.
Yeah, I think that "Okay, boomer," it's come at pretty much the perfect time, because if it had come any earlier, it would have been inappropriate. But the generation of millennials trying to be like, no, but humanity though. And nobody listening.
That all said, welcome to Hammered Out, everybody. I know that
yeah, it's Hammered Out. Welcome to the show.
My hammer is still snapped in half, so this is the hammer I got right now. Just
I'm sorry that you have hammer dysfunction.
You know what? I've heard though that if this hammer increases in size but it stays that way for over 4 hours, I need to actually call a doctor. Why would I call a doctor? That's what I want. 4 hours of increased performance from hammer.
But it sounds great to me. I mean, I don't have a hammer though.
Oh,
sorry.
That's everybody press F to pay respects. Progressive Liberal does not have a hammer. So that's it. If you are watching on YouTube and you have been keeping up with my channel, then you do know that this is the last Hammered Out episode. As far as I know, obviously, if something happens, we might change it. No, not the last Hammered Out episode.
What?
Last Hammered Out episode that is going on YouTube first.
Is firing me.
This is the last one going on YouTube first. After this, it will go on to Twitch first, and then you will see it a day or two later on my channel.
Something in perpetuity.
Oh my god! Oh my god! And a non sequitur off of that. Oh my gosh! So the other thing that we're going to be doing is some of the rules regarding what is super chats on YouTube and what is considered an actual. Like a bit donation on Twitch. Some of the rules for that are going to change. Normally, we try to answer things if they're relevant, as the show goes. Now we're going to have it set to where those are answered after the fact. After we are finished with the show proper, we'll have another segment afterwards where we can answer stuff like that. That way, one, it guarantees that we don't lose track of those, because otherwise we will. Two, that'll make it to where the other thing that's going to be happening with the show we'll be able to do, and that's that I've been paying for the service for roughly 5 months now and have not actually done anything with it, but we are going to be actually putting the podcast onto an actual podcasting service instead of just having it on YouTube.
What?
Cool.
So,
what?
But in order to do that, I also need to make sure that the show itself is somewhat more focused, and one way to do that, one of the complaints that we have had is that we go on tangents every now and again, and while I love those tangents, I really do.
I do too. The factory warranty of my vehicle expired, Cyrus.
Well, I do love those tangents. Oh my god! In an effort to try to minimize those, we are going to make sure that that super chats and donations are done afterwards. Also, I've noticed. I just noticed in the Twitch chat, Gaelic not saying, "Sirs, I'm sorry it took so long." Yes, the reason that we have not put the podcast onto the podcasting service is because 5 months ago, I requested the thumbnail be made for the podcast itself because there's like a specific thumbnail size and everything requirement that's needed for Fireside Podcasting, which is what we're going to be using to send it over to iTunes and everything else. And I sent that 5 months ago, and I waited very patiently from my wonderful partner Emmett to make that. And then we had a conversation a few weeks ago where I mentioned that, oh yeah, no, I still don't have that thumbnail. And she then goes, "Well, you never asked me for it." So I went into the Discord search chat and found where I asked her and found that it was 5 months ago, screenshotted it, sent it to her.
She's giving you a response that is in all caps.
Oh no, she's mad. She's mad. So it was it was. That said, it's now I can have that as a fun story to use, but I am very thankful for the thumbnail that has come through, and I'm not just saying that so as to attempt to save my own life, although there is a little bit of that in there. A little bit of that in there. That said, you know I have the memory of a fly. Anyway, that said, in the now that those updates have been given out to everybody, and you guys know what's going on with the show, Hammered Out is still going to be on YouTube. It just won't be live on YouTube because I am trying to make certain that I can do some measured improvements to the show. That said, Ocean, how do you feel about all this? Because I haven't actually had a sit down with you about this.
We'll discuss it later. No, I think that I think it's a good plan. The streaming system for YouTube has progressively gotten shittier and shittier and shittier, and Twitch is based around streaming. So I just put a link to the Twitch in the chat so that you guys can start boosting our metrics or Cyrus's metrics over there as much as possible starting now. But now I have both chats up and I'm looking at them. But I think that I think we have a good plan, or you have a good plan. I will go along with it. We'll put it that way.
We have a good plan going for it. And maybe
then I'll complain for the next 6 weeks.
Maybe eventually, off of the myriad of shows that I've made for my channel, maybe eventually I'll be able to make a living wage off of it so that I can actually start paying Ocean for the work he's put in.
Gasp.
Eventually. But today we do have a guest, and that is Progressive Liberal, who seems to be incredibly patient right now. Very, very patient.
I have a 3-year-old stepdaughter. You learn. You learn.
We just got compared to 3-year-olds.
No. I don't think that the comparison is. I don't think the comparison is terribly off. Like let's be 110% honest with each other, right? Ocean, is there a difference between me and a 3-year-old, except for the fact that I can engage in marginally more sophistry?
Oh no, that was the difference I was thinking of.
6 months ago, she was sitting
I was about
here.
to say, no, Cyrus is way more capable of being a dick than a 3-year-old.
6 months ago, she was sitting right here eating peanuts just like these. Suddenly started crying. We figured out it was because she had stuck one of them up her nose. I'm not saying that I would suspect either of you would do the same thing.
Right.
However,
it's just a story I wanted to tell.
However, I will say that I am more likely to have peanut butter around than peanuts, and it sure. may or may not be because of that problem.
Wait a minute.
Yes, Ocean?
Go ahead.
Nothing. All right, so
nothing.
We have been on air for some time, and we haven't gotten even to the fucking topic. So speaking of being more focused,
I thought this was.
I'm going to stop waiting for Cyrus and actually bring this up. So earlier this week,
going to do it?
I don't know. It's going to be that kind of thing where it's like we just both stare at each other silently, waiting for the other person to make the first comment of the podcast and see how long that goes.
So you mean this is going to be roughly like 5 or 6 of the production minutes of Evangelion.
Podcast chicken, I think, is what we should call it. So
if you blink,
anyway,
you lose.
I've got like things going off everywhere right now.
He who blinks must talk about Elizabeth Warren's economics. There.
So about a week ago, I made a post that was interesting on the the Bluebird website,
the toxic cancerous place.
Yeah, the place where everyone is mature and all conversations are meaningful and productive. So, anyway, I made a post saying like, well, Elizabeth Warren just published her plan. The price tag on it seems pretty fucking astronomical. Should we look at other ideas? Like this is should we look at the should we look at public option ideas about like government insurance and that kind of stuff? And out of the darkness came progressive liberal and his tweet machine, and he owned me with facts and that's that he just posted the blog for Elizabeth Warren's proposal saying like, have you read the whole thing? And I was like, no, I really haven't.
Ocean kill
like, well, let's kind of go through it.
Destroy.
So
finish him.
So I was like, well, shit, like let's have a hammered out where we kind of go through what this plan is, what it actually addresses. It'll be a lot of progressive liberal talking.
Oh, great.
Because I don't have my brain fully around this thing. I support the idea of universal healthcare generally. I have some understandings of people that are like the successes and frustrations with it as it's been implemented in especially Britain. That people complain about the NHS and waiting times with appointments fairly often. But then there's like the cost element that I haven't seen like the math, but I keep hearing it's putting people into massive amounts of debt and causing economies to swirl out of control and spin out of the weeds and all that kind of shit. So those are things that I want to explore, and because I'm sure that Warren's plan addresses a lot of these things because she seems like a smart cookie. So with that, I guess I'll hand it either to Cirrus or Progressive Liberal, whichever one. Cirrus, did you get a new webcam?
No, actually, this is the same one as usual. However,
it looks better.
Well, it looks better because my lighting is better now.
That'll do it.
Yeah, this is just from lighting.
Your hand is blown out to fuck, but it looks better.
I mean, as soon as I have my hand here, it's fine.
Right.
The reason is because I'm 2.5 feet away from my studio light, so my pale ass getting up here, it's like I'm a mirror now reflecting. But no, because I have it there. Moreover, it's also directly above my camera itself. So my camera is getting the biggest benefit from that light that it possibly can. So that's the reason why. My quality looks better because I learned how to use a fucking light.
The law of inverse squares, gentlemen, is what determines the softness of that light. Anyway, first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for having me here. Really means a lot to me. And
absolutely, man.
I've been a fan of both of you guys for a long time. So just to sit down and have a conversation with you guys on this topic is amazing to me.
Hey, I've made many mistakes in my life as well.
You're right.
Yeah, I don't know why you're a fan of me. I'm an asshole.
The TLDR summary of Warren's plan is it's fine.
Cool. This was hammered out, guys. Thank you so much.
Yep,
we're gonna conclude the day. That was good.
Later,
all right,
guys.
bye.
You know what that means. Sorry, guys. It's time for us to go. Just
smash that like button. Make sure you hit the notification bell.
Like and subscribe.
And that's it. There you go. No, so we probably want to go in slightly more depth than that. Okay, so we've got a couple of different options here when we're talking about healthcare. You could have what we currently have, right, where healthcare is determined by your insurance. So in order to get healthcare, in most cases, yes, there are outliers. Okay, there are things for children, there are things for disabled people. Let's just talk about generally a working adult in the United States who needs healthcare for some reason. Okay, you get insurance through your employer. Your employer pays the majority of your deductible. I'm sorry, not deductible, your premium. You pay the rest of the premium. When you go to access that care, you pay a deductible or a copay, some other kind of other payment. And you're only covered up to a certain amount usually. So you can get like, $250,000 worth of care, but anything over that you have to pay out of pocket.
You can get that much care, and then you get cancer.
Right.
And then suddenly you need much more care than that. Can I put a pin in that for 1 second though?
Sure,
Because
please.
there's actually a little bit of cognitive dissonance that I've seen from people who try to argue against universal healthcare of any variety, because basically saying that our current system isn't broken. On the one hand,
Our current system is broken as fuck.
oh, it is. But I want to posit two things for you real quick while they're on my mind, because otherwise I'll forget them.
Sure.
The first one is that America is known as a place of entrepreneurs. This is a place where people can strike out on their own and do their own thing and do very well. Okay, but on the other hand, in order to be able to even afford healthcare in most cases, you must be employed by another company, basically cutting out the legs from anybody who could possibly ever want to be an entrepreneur.
Sure.
Right.
Because now you're in a situation where the most profitable thing for you is not to start your own business, but to get healthcare by just working for somebody else and saying that any hopes, dreams, and aspirations you might have, they can go out the window. What I'm saying is healthcare fucking blows for YouTubers. Anyways, continue.
Right. So, and then the
We
other
need a
option,
benefits package, YouTube.
yeah.
I get a 1099 miscellaneous. You think freelancers get benefits packages?
Well, so the other option, there are society. For instance, I think it's the National Realtors Association. If you have a real estate license, okay, first you would have to have a real estate license. You got to go get one of those. Then you can join the National Realtors Association, and get your healthcare through them. So there are associations out there that independent contractors can be a part of and get healthcare through them. But you or I can't go to Blue Cross Blue Shield and be like, I want a healthcare plan.
No, we have to wait for open enrollment periods. Once we're in the
Right.
open enrollment period, we have to actually either shop around for specific individual packages or consult the market and go
Right.
there. Those are the options that we have.
Right.
And those options
So-
kind of suck.
The other option that is being proposed is a public option. A public option is an option that is therefore open to the public that you could buy into, that would give you Medicare usually. That's what most public options. Now, the public option through the ACA let you buy into the marketplace, that you got marketplace insurance that was different by state. And if your state had a Medicare expansion, maybe sometimes it was buying into that or a portion of that. In other words, what I'm trying to say here, it's really fucking complicated. All of these are really complicated, and they've got all of these. If you're a kid, if you're disabled, if you're this age, if you're that age, if you're parents, if all of this different stuff is really fucking complicated. Medicare for All says everybody gets Medicare, and all healthcare providers accept Medicare, and they all get paid at Medicare rates for things.
That's
caveats.
probably the most important part there, because one of the things that I've learned about the medical insurance industry in general is that the medical insurance industry has largely been responsible for many of the price hikes that we've had in the medical system.
So the example we were talking about on the show last night, let's pretend that the three of us are in a car accident. All three of us are in a car accident. I'm on Medicare. Cyrus, you have insurance through your job. And Ocean, you have insurance through the marketplace. We aren't covered the same, okay? Let's throw in the complication that it's a work truck, and that we are, Cyrus is at work driving the car, but we were in the car for some reason. We weren't supposed to be in the car, but we were in the car, and we've all gotten into an accident.
Oh, we're fucked.
The complication.
Well, you two are fucked. I'm probably going to get workers' comp.
You're also
Maybe.
fired.
But we weren't supposed to be in the truck. So are you going to get workers' comp?
If in that case, actually, yes, I would still get workers' comp, but after that, I would probably be fired for violations. But I
Okay,
would still get.
that's fair.
I would. So I'm speaking as somebody who has a mother who actually worked in the insurance field, specifically in getting people workers' comp coverage. So this scenario that you're painting for me is one that she's actually had to deal with. If I had the forethought for it, I would have been like, "Hey, Mom, do you want to come on the show?" Even though we ideologically disagree with each other on 1,000 things, but from what I understand in the situation, this person would get workers' comp because it's a work vehicle, and I imagine this is happening during work hours.
Yes, that's the scenario. Right,
If it's a work vehicle and it's happening during work hours, they would receive workers' comp benefits. They would have to receive workers' comp benefits. But if having you two in the vehicle was a violation, which in many cases it would be, then in that case I would probably be losing my job afterwards because I have brought two people in, and now there's an issue where the company may have a PR problem because if they cover me, which they have to because workers' comp, but they don't cover you two, they have potentially, should I want to pursue them legally, a potential PR nightmare where now there's a whole bunch of people who are going to argue for the human rights of the people who are in the vehicle who are not being covered by the company, who, for them, because I'm working for the company caused me to be, or caused you two to be injured.
Right.
That's the way this is going to look like from a PR perspective.
Sure.
So what I'm saying is this is a nightmarishly complicated scenario where nobody wins.
Right. And let's change it up a little bit. Let's say that Cirrus, you're at a construction site and you're on a ladder, okay? And for whatever reason, you fall off the ladder and you fall onto me and Ocean, okay?
Well, you're both probably paralyzed for life because I'm fucking fat.
I mean, maybe. The point is, right now, if I've got let's say I've got Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Ocean, you've got fucking another one. I don't know, another insurance company. It's the only one I can think of right now. Now, all of these different insurance companies...
Dude Buddy McBroho.
Sure, whatever.
Statewide insurance. It's a small company.
Sure. All of these different insurance companies are all going to have to coordinate with each other, have to coordinate with the hospital, have to coordinate with whatever medical providers have to be involved. There are incredible amounts of administrative costs in just getting our care paid for. We're not talking about the care itself. I'm talking about the people at Dude Bro Statewide, the person at Cirrus's workers' comp, the people at Cirrus's company, all having to coordinate.
Yeah, they have to deliberate now over who's going to pay what.
Sure.
That's the next part.
There could be court cases, all kinds of shit that's got to be paid for. Well, with Medicare for All,
we got to spend $5,000 in court fees to find out who's going to pay for the $30,000 of medical fees.
Sure.
$5,000 in court fees? You've not been in this world very long.
Well, they only filed one piece of paper.
Yeah, they only filed one thing. But now it's what you're talking about, a complicated suit. Oh shit! Now it's going to be about $30,000 in court fees to find out who's going to pay the $30,000 medical bill.
Yeah,
well, it's going to be $30,000 in court fees to find out who the lawyer is who's going to argue. Anyway, one thing that Warren talks about a lot in her plan is all of these administrative costs and eliminating all of those administrative costs day one by saying, well, day one of year 10, but we'll get to that. So Medicare for All eliminates all of those because there is no more administrative costs. The Medicare for All says, hey, if you're a hospital, you're taking costs at Medicare prices. In most cases, there's caveats to that, but
a lot of those admin costs are changed into just regulations that have to be abided by, I guess.
Yeah.
Roughly what happens?
Right. There's only one person at Cirrus's job that has to worry about anything. There's no such thing as workers' comp. If Cirrus is hurt, he goes to the doctor. If I'm hurt because Cirrus fell on me at work, maybe I'll sue his company later, but I get health care.
Right, but what you would be suing wouldn't have anything to do with healthcare costs.
Sure,
it would have to do with lost wages or something like that.
Right, sure, absolutely. Because I'm just going to go get healthcare. I go to the doctor, I go to the hospital, I get the healthcare that I need, and it's paid.
Kills a lot of liability. Conversations.
Right. What liability?
Yeah. Okay.
Right. I mean the liability afterwards, because you could sue the company for malfeasance or negligence or whatever it is.
Right. But as far as relating to healthcare, no, it doesn't.
Right. Right. So a big part of her plan, like the first, quarter of it or something is about all the administrative costs. Think about the insurance companies themselves. They have 2,500 lobbyists in Washington arguing their cases for different things. Now all those people don't have to be paid for. The insurance companies themselves make tens of billions of dollars in profit. Remember that they're taking in all of your money each month and the money from your employer, and then they're finding ways not to cover you. And when they find ways to not cover you, they still got that money, and that money is a profit for them. It helps their stock.
I came to a conclusion that I don't have health insurance.
Sure.
And one of the reasons why I don't is because I just got frustrated with the idea of paying somebody to figure out how to fuck me over.
Yes.
Like that just seems like a shitty system to me. So
remember that they have claims departments. They have entire people that work literally all day long to find out how they can not pay for your health care whenever the health care that you paid for. You fucking paid for it.
Yeah, it's like I've given you guys money. Just give me back the money that I fucking gave you. And I wound up there's the problem with, like, obviously, let's say that if you go through insurance and it works and you pay, $250 a month and your bill is like $100,000, then yeah, you wound up coming out ahead. That financial investment that you made covered you for an unforeseeable event, and now you're not like fucked in the hole in debt. But otherwise, it could be that you just paid $250 a month to cover insurance, and you have $100,000 in debt.
Sure, exactly.
Because the insurance company went, well, it doesn't cover what we're doing, and this is you're actually here instead of there, and that's a problem.
And there's usually a cap, so you get coverage up to a certain amount, and after that, you're sell your fucking house, I guess. The insurance companies.
The reason why cancer winds up screwing people over is because they have to pay that.
Yes, on average in 2018, American families paid $12,378 in 2018 for health insurance.
For the insurance.
Okay. Let me make sure.
They said, what is that? Because that could be so. That's insurance bills.
Right.
$12,000.
Right. That's what their premium was for the household.
Average premium. Go. Cool.
Yes. And yet 87 million people aren't insured or are underinsured. So what that
that's
means,
at an average of 12,000. So an average of 12,000 doesn't cover is without fully covering.
Right.
7%. Wait, how many did you say? 87 million?
87 million people are not
I have
insured.
my numbers over here. I'm just trying to make sure.
No, it's all good. No, double check. Absolutely.
Yeah. 87 million. 87 million people. Now, there are two ways to think about that. There are 87 million people that the insurance companies don't have to worry about covering, right? But there's also 87 million people who didn't pay into the system.
Right.
So there is untapped revenue available for Medicare to cover. Since I know people are going to want to know, let me just go over the numbers really, really quick. Let me get down to them.
Yeah.
Okay. So our current system.
But first, what's the source that you're using on this is?
This is Elizabeth's blog.
This is Elizabeth's blog. Okay.
Yeah. This is the link I put in there. Okay. Under our current system, over 10 years, we will spend $52 trillion on healthcare. That's not that is.
That's the will spend. Yeah.
That's what we will spend right now. $52 trillion.
Yeah, we have some of the, in comparison to other countries, per capita, we have some of the highest spending. The UK spends half of what we do.
Yes.
Japan's spending is about the same as the UK's. I'm looking at the numbers right now. France, Germany, and Canada are all above Japan and the UK, but they are still significantly lower than us. Yeah,
right.
No. Our medical spending is astronomical compared to other first world countries.
Absolutely.
So I know that Ethan wants to get through the numbers, so go ahead and let you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just list off a bunch of the stuff that you wanted to list off, right? So
sure.
You were looking at 50, you said how many trillion? 50-something trillion?
$52 trillion over 10 years. That's what we are going to spend.
Yeah.
63 million have coverage gaps or substandard coverage. That's the people that are underinsured. Does that make sense? Now, $11 trillion is what the people themselves will pay. That's what Americans themselves pay. The rest is paid for by their companies, by their employers. Remember that whatever your premium is, your employer is paying usually about 2/3 of whatever it is that you're paying. It's a good number to keep in your head. It's not always accurate, but it's a good, high level view. She's saying that her Medicare for All plan will cost less than the $52 trillion. She is saying that the $11 trillion that people are paying right now, they won't pay anymore. She wants to take all of the money paid by employers and pipe it directly into Medicare. So whatever your company is paying right now to insurance companies would instead go into the Medicare bucket.
It becomes a corporate tax instead of a personal tax.
However,
as opposed to covering people on an individual basis, you instead have one communal fund that everybody can dip into when it's needed.
Right. And whatever that the numbers are for the premium would then become part of the employer tax. Now, your employer already pays taxes on you when they hire you. That's something that all employers have to do. There's certain taxes associated with hiring new people. There are certain costs that are paid for, like E-Verify, costs that are paid to I can't think of the word right now, but it's a tax on hiring. It's a tax on getting a new person into the system. They also have to pay into Medicaid. They have to pay into what's its face fucking thing. Anyway, there are certain things that employers have to pay right now. So this would just
Security?
be Social Security. Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is just something else that would go on that item line, but the insurance premium item line would go away. So there would be no. It's not an uptick. It's not a downtick. It's going.
Ideally, it winds up staying the same.
Correct.
Is there? So, but her plan actually does that, where it would just have essentially just replaces.
Right.
It's over. Okay.
Yep.
Now, then we get into the question of like, if it's implemented, is that actually what it's going to do? Is that the function? Like,
So if we're ready, we can go into plausibility. Right now.
Right.
And no one should take me talking about her plan as endorsing it. I'm not endorsing the plan. We're just talking about.
Neither am I.
We're talking about.
This all came from me asking a question about like whether or not we should support it. So.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. We just want to make sure that we have an understanding of what she's proposing before we talk about
absolutely.
Viability. What were you going to say, Sirius? I'm
there
sorry.
is a question that I do have about the plan. Is there anywhere in the plan where pre-existing health insurance companies actually have a place to fit in, or do they basically just get abolished after this point?
Basically, from what I've read, from what I understand, it's just they're abolished. They just There's no need now. What some people I've seen talk about is that there are things that Medicare maybe wouldn't cover, facial reconstructive surgeries or other plastic surgery, however you want to say it, cosmetic surgeries. There is some discussion as to whether or not they would cover things like transitional procedures for trans people, HRT, that sort of thing. I think
the argument of over elective, like what is considered an elective surgery.
Yeah, because at that point you're basically determining, because this is where you get into some of the what's the best way to put it? Some of the more complicated discussions when it comes to what is cosmetic. You have to look at the source of, well, why is somebody getting this cosmetic surgery? Are they getting it because they are suffering from dysphoria or dysmorphia? Well, then at that point, it's not cosmetic; it's medical.
No, and I agree with you. It's just there's question as to how do you set that up legislatively. I agree with you morally and ethically, absolutely. But legislatively, how do you construct that? And then if there's a complication from choosing to have an elective surgery, do you need an insurance company to ensure that the transition is done right? So you're getting into like super complicated legislative questions, but they are valid questions. And I agree with you that we have to get answers.
They have to be figured out.
Sure, absolutely.
So the reason I brought up the insurance thing, when we're talking about discussions like this where healthcare is brought up, usually the NHS or Canada's healthcare plan are some of the ones that are pointed to more often than not as like things the United States should model after closely. maybe it's the fact that I'm living with somebody who grew up in Japan and is more used to the way their healthcare system works. I've heard more positive, I guess you would just call it positive apologetics, for that system. In their system, they actually do have health insurance, but the health insurance is A, mandatory, and B, the fees themselves for your health insurance, all of those fees are regulated by the government, and the government themselves, the reason that the fees being regulated by the government, they have an incentive on keeping those fees low is because the government will pay 70% of any and all medical expenses that any person who's a resident of Japan has to take on. They're only 30% responsible for any of those expenses, and then insurance kicks in. So the government, while controlling those prices and fees for all of that, they have an incentive on keeping that rate low because they have to pay 70% of that rate. They also have laws that say that hospitals must be ran as nonprofits. If they are ran for profit at any point, they are no longer allowed to be hospitals, and it all goes away. And they have to be owned and operated by physicians specifically. They cannot be owned and operated by like a capitalistic financier. It has to be specifically by people who are actually invested in the Hippocratic Oath. And that's how they have their structure set up there. Now, would you say that Warren's plan I know that if Warren's plan is abolishing things like insurance, obviously it's not mirroring that plan very much. It's obviously very different. How would you say her plan stacks up to a system like that? Because when I see a system like that, that actually sounds like not just a marginal improvement over what we have, but an astronomical one over what we have.
The biggest issue with any kind of new plan is getting hospitals to sign on to it. And she spends a lot of time talking about that in her plan. She is going to require, and we can get deeper into this because there's some caveats, but she would require all hospitals to accept current Medicare prices. There are caveats for like rural hospitals and specialty hospitals and stuff that may need may need different costs for different reasons. She acknowledges that, and that's in there. But at a high level, hospitals would accept Medicare prices. You've got a lot of for-profit hospitals where the CEO of the hospital makes $3 million a year. Do you think that guy wants to take a pay cut? Probably not.
True. So in both Warren's and Japan's system, he would be taking a pay cut because in one he has to run as a nonprofit.
Right, exactly. And the fact that we have for-profit hospitals at all is disgusting to me. I don't like the idea of a for-profit hospital.
No.
But
I don't think that my life has an actual price on it at that point. Now, maybe that if you go into the dark web and you want to spend about $25,000, then yeah, there's probably a price on my life at that point.
Probably.
We're not getting into that discussion.
Right. The point is that Warren says we have a moral, and Bernie does too. I'm not trying to shit on Bernie. We're just talking about Warren today. But we have a moral. It is a moral imperative to figure out how to pay for it, because the current system that we have is producing unhealthy Americans, and it is not fixing the healthcare of Americans who need it in a way that is financially feasible for them, for most of them.
Agreed. I think that's a good starting point, right?
Sure.
So
there is a question, another question that would need to be addressed though, when you are dealing. So, and this is not just me speaking from somebody who grew up where like the house was paid for by somebody who was working in the medical insurance industry, but we do have a little over 6 million people who are working in that industry. Is there some plan there for making sure that those people are not just out of a job once that system is implemented? Because if you're going to have a system that abolishes insurance, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing inherently because of the things that insurance companies have been able to leverage for in the States, but what I am saying though is that there's enough people who need jobs. Are you not trading one evil for another at that point by simply just slicing those jobs out of the market completely? What actually happens to those 6 million people?
That's an excellent question. So it's one of my biggest fears as well. First of all, I'm going to point to the ACA. When the ACA was passed, it created a lot of jobs. It created, I believe, 13,000 jobs. So the expansion of Medicare, we have already seen demonstrably that more jobs were created.
But 13,000 is a drip in the bucket compared to
Yes.
6 million.
Which is exactly what I was about to say. Will it replace them? I have no idea. I don't know that anyone could know. That's one of the reasons why Warren wants a 10-year transition period instead of the 4-year that people like me and Bernie want. Because you are talking about a lot of jobs that are lost, and you're talking about a lot of jobs that are going to be transferred, maybe. Medicare would have to expand. That's unquestionable. You'll need more people in the call centers, and you'll need more HR people, and you'll need all the different things that you need whenever bureaucratic infrastructure expands. Will there be 6 million of those jobs? I don't know. I don't know that anybody knows. It's something that will have to be worked out as the transition happens. Now, other companies will need to expand as well, because other companies, medical provider companies, prescription drug companies, will have to deal with this new infrastructure. So there will be administrative expansion there as well. Will it cover the 6 million jobs? Could it create more jobs? I don't know. Nobody knows. You can project. You can say maybe. You can say no. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to do it and figure it out.
So I know that this is a thing that you get with practically anything. When you have when you had the Industrial Revolution in America, you created thousands of jobs for
Easily.
the American people.
Right. Sure.
But as America started to move out of the industrial phase, and we started to close down a lot of those factories, a lot of the, for instance, coal mining facilities were one of the things that we started getting rid of as much as we used to have. And you effectively nixed a lot of jobs from people who, in many cases, didn't know anything else. How, as from what I understand,
ironically, we had that happen. This was the fear about the Industrial Revolution when it happened. They thought that that with the machines that were going to be handling agricultural jobs, it was like what people saw initially about the Industrial Revolution was that it was just going to eliminate agricultural jobs.
But what it did was create
a bunch of factory jobs, right? So, and this is somewhat the conversation. I'm going to try and avoid going on a tangent here, but this is somewhat the conversation around automation versus Industrial Revolution. That automation winds up
automation's inevitable.
It would purely eliminate jobs, but then there's the question of what kind of jobs would it create? Are there people that are ready for those jobs, and so on? And the transition from agricultural jobs to factory jobs is easy. The transition from driving jobs to technology jobs is not as easy.
It's not.
So, that question comes in with, if you're going to eliminate 6 million jobs out of the insurance industry, especially on the advent of the automation of driving jobs, you're looking at eliminating a lot of jobs.
Sure. No, and I agree with you. Here's the issue with my issue with that argument has always been, what we're doing today is not what we're going to be doing tomorrow.
Right.
And whether today and tomorrow is today and tomorrow, or today in 10 years, or today in 100 years, things are going to change. Either we prepare for them or we don't. Either we accept the fact that what we have isn't working and we have to change it, and that's going to cost us things, jobs, jobs, training, whatever, all the things that you put in the sphere of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
We have to accept that society changes over time, and we can legislate ourselves into keeping it the way that it is for only so long before things are going to change out of our control.
At that point, you end up having what's called a bottom out, where you're supporting something that has no real reason to be there anymore up until the point where it bottoms out, because there's only so long you can even inspect employers, for instance, who are notorious for trying to cut costs so that their bottom line is taken care of. There's only so long you can convince employers not to take the more financially profitable motive of just eliminating those jobs and putting in automation. For instance, a lot of we've seen this in fast food places with kiosks, making it to where there's one or two less people required on the front. As somebody who used to work as a manager in fast food, that's a good and bad thing. On the one hand, you manage to make it to where you have one less person required on the front, which is good for your bottom line. And on the other hand, you get that one person who punches your machine because they don't know how to order a Big Mac.
Right.
But
what is this confounded technology?
You have no Ocean. You have no idea. That's a thing that happens. Sure. That is in fact a thing that happens. It's happened at every job I've worked that has had an automated kiosk. It happened at McDonald's. It happened at Quick Trip. Every single time you have one of those automatic.
First time I went to Sheetz, I got so confused.
Every single time, there's one person who just sits there, just like, I hate this machine. Why can't I just talk to a person? And like, well, sir,
because
I'm sorry
the company doesn't want to talk to you. We just want to give you a sandwich.
I'm sorry that the education system has failed you, sir. But so
the company has decided to adopt antisocial behavior in the interests of profit.
Right.
So the point I bring in with that though is that it's inevitable. You can't legislatively try to convince employers to keep jobs that are going to be phased out, because in a free market, and we don't have a fully free market, we have a 73% free market. I've looked up these numbers when responding to a video before.
They're still wrong. No, I'm just kidding.
But in a mostly free market, you cannot convince a CEO not to take the financially profitable solution. And the profitable solution is automation. This is where we get... I know that we're talking about Warren right now, so getting into a conversation about UBI is probably not going to be a good idea right now.
It's all the same thing. That's
you and the Yang Gang get back in that tiny little car. And
I am not for Yang Gang. No. I am for UBI, but not in the nightmarishly irresponsible way that Andrew Yang seems to be advocating for it.
Get your bag, man.
I agree. We did a whole show. It's called "Is Yang's UBI Bullshit?" Look it up. It was really fun.
TLDR.
I've had that conversation with a couple of people.
Right.
Like Yang,
TLDR.
I like that they were having a conversation about it, but I don't know if Yang's proposition is where we need to go.
Right.
I like
absolutely.
that he's.
Exactly.
I think that his point of like, let's get into the debate and talk about it and all that kind of shit. That's all good and all that crap. But
no, totally, absolutely.
But anyway.
But it's all part of the
Stay
same
away
conversation.
From tangents.
Right. The issue is that it's all the same. It's all about the exact same thing. And I'm going to throw old school. The old schoolist argument about this is Marx's book. Marx was talking about this a long time ago. And sir, you just brought it
up. Which book? Das Kapital?
Well, yeah, sort of.
Excuse me. Excuse me, guys. All right.
But I'm not a Marxist.
The commies have come. It's like somebody called Dennis Prager.
Somebody called Dennis Prager. But
what you need to understand is that with communism, you drop a baby underwater and it fucking dies.
Marx's underlying argument was that the Industrial Revolution as a whole was unsustainable forever. That you couldn't forever produce things faster, cheaper, and better. Because at some point you produce a thing that's as fast and cheap as better as it gets.
Labor theory of value. What?
So
can we also point out that this usually in this conversation somebody brings up Moore's law.
I know. No.
And Moore's law is bullshit
versus labor theory of value.
Right. I wasn't going to be that mean, but it is. And Adam's hand is not invisible. I agree with you. But the issue is...
I want to see a three-way fight. Sorry. I want to see a three-way fight between Adam's invisible hand, Moore's law.
Yes.
And the labor theory of value. I just like to see them just like clash at each other.
And you know what? I want it to be a rap battle.
Anyway,
didn't you know that every 2 years?
I'm gonna hand the talking hammer goes back to progressive liberal. I'm sorry, I totally.
But no, it's okay. But the issue is that it's all about the same thing. It's why people like me aren't just liberals; we're progressive liberals, right? The oldest one, well, maybe not the oldest. One of the oldest issues with economics is that taxation is either progressive or it's regressive. It either taxes rich people more than it taxes other people, or it doesn't. One of those things is progressive and one of those things is regressive, or there's neutral taxation, which for me is fucking pipe dream.
Flat tax, yeah.
Yeah, it's flat.
Let's close the door of the IRS and just do a sales tax.
Exactly. So again, it's probably not the oldest issue in economics, but it's one of the oldest. And it's the reason that liberalism is inherently tied to progressivism is that liberalism tends to say that, hey, rich people and the people in the middle class are being oppressed by the richer people. And that's also what progressive taxation strives to prevent. So when you're talking about all these things, when you're talking about automation, when you're talking about a UBI, when you're talking about universal healthcare, you're talking about the same things. You're talking about progressive mindset. You're talking about the application of liberal freedom.
You started talking about it and the rain came down infinitely harder than normal. What the fuck?
And so when you're talking about these things, it's all the same conversation. So it's okay to be having this conversation over here about, oh, we need universal health care, and then say, well, what's going to happen to those jobs? What's going to happen to those people? Because that is liberalism. That is what the idea of progressivism is. So yeah, we need universal health care, but we also need to make sure that we don't bankrupt our people by putting too many people out of jobs all at once. That's why Harrison and Warren's plans are 10-year transition periods, and why Bernie says 4 years is enough. Is it? I don't know. I don't think anybody fucking knows, by the way. I don't know that I'm right. I just hope that I am, I guess.
So from what I understand, and I don't know Bernie's plan specifically, but I do remember there being something in Bernie's plan about the people who will be affected, because in a 10-year transition, you give enough time for people to learn new skills to go transition to other jobs.
Right.
The argument that they should have to do that is somewhat hard to justify, but again, you can't convince the CEO not to get rid of the bottom out problem sooner rather than later. But if memory serves, there's something in Bernie's plan about giving federal jobs or certain types of federal jobs to people who would be disproportionately affected in a negative way from his plan, because his plan has expediency on it. The problem with, say, Warren's plan, one of the biggest problems with Warren's plans, from as far as I can tell, is that if she doesn't get reelected, like if she gets reelected and doesn't get reelected, now her 10-year plan could just be undone by a Republican.
Sure.
And even if she does get reelected, during the final stages, you might just have a Republican go, let's stop that anyway.
So the biggest issue with the government
don't make a plan that depends on the Senate doing something.
Yeah. So the biggest issue with the government is intentional. The Federalists, so our first two parties in the United States were the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist, and people are going to argue with me about that, but
he brought Antifa.
Fucking accept it. So the Federalists said
it was the Democratic Republicans
that legislation needed to be passed slowly, that the cogs in the wheels of legislation, the slower they worked, the better. And our government is set up to do that intentionally. One of the things that our government does to ensure that is that there's a new Congress every 2 years. Every 2 years, a different Congress sits. And since Congress is the legislative body, if Congress has passed some law, and that law is wildly unpopular, the theory of our government is that a new Congress will be sat that will overrule it or will amend it, whatever needs to be done in order to make sure that it's popular and is fixed, right? The issue with any one of these plans is that it could be derailed. Obamacare was largely derailed by the Congress that came after the one that barely passed it.
And in the deliberation in passing it, we got so many things that were not part of the original plan that made it an absolute clusterfuck when we got it. Who the fuck writes a plan that says that, what's that? You're too poor to afford health insurance? That'll be a $3,000 fine on year 3?
Right.
Who the fuck passes a plan like that?
And Democrats voted for it. Think about that. Democrats got so fucking bonkers that they voted for that.
Remember, though,
It's insane.
remember, there's the reason for this. The reason this happens, if you remember before the show, and nobody who's watching remembers before the show, but to give that little bit of behind the scenes, one of the conversations we had before the show actually began was the conversation about taking the moderate position versus taking the extreme position. When you take the extreme position, and one of the things that I didn't get into during that because I wanted to save it for the show itself is there's two things that you get when you take the extreme position. One, you have a lot of wiggle room when it comes to deliberation. If you take the extreme position from the get-go, when you do deliberate, you might actually be able to get to a position where you are more comfortable. This is just how bartering works. Like
Right.
for those of you who've never traded Pokemon cards, this is just how you do trading cards, okay?
Or bought a house, maybe.
Yeah, like
I mean, speak a little bit to that though, because like say, if you there's a dangerous game that you kind of play with that, as far as like what position you're going to wind up offering forward first. Because if say you're buying a house and you say, well, the general rule is that you give an offer and then they give a counter offer, and you wind up somewhere between the sticker price of the house
Generally.
and what you initially offered, and it's sometimes it meets halfway, sometimes it leans one way or the other, and that's fine. The if we take your philosophy to the extreme and we offer the extreme position,
let us reductio it, dude.
I will offer my first offer on this house will be give it to me for free. And hopefully by then we'll be able to work out. I'll take half off.
Well, I mean,
Sure.
so
That's not going to wind up happening. Is the problem?
So that's fair, but that's why when you are taking the extreme position, you don't take the most extreme position. You don't sit there and go, "What's the reductio ad absurdum of pro-choice?" All right, everybody, I have it. Antinatalism. Now
we murder all the
Right.
babies.
Well, and it's also why you do a comparative market analysis before you buy the house, so that you know what the fair value is.
Yes.
Right.
Again, this is another thing you do when you're doing trading cards, by the way.
Sure, absolutely.
You get the
sure.
comparative market analysis for the trading cards. Get that shit together and go.
That's Ocean. You have
I'm not
no
even
idea.
kidding.
You have no idea. This is what happens.
I know that's what I know. I had the little value book for the I was in elementary school.
So
Of Pokemon cards. This was a thing for Beanie Babies.
Yes,
if you recall that.
Any
I
collectible.
know that everybody in chat is too young for that crap, but still.
So there's one more advantage though with taking the extreme position, as long as you're willing to not make yourself look like a nut job when you do it. The other advantage, and this is something we've actually seen Bernie do from time to time, is that when you're taking the extreme position, you recognize that your position is not ultimately going to be the position passed through legislation. That's the reality of it. But you do have the ability in taking that extreme position to shift the Overton window. You, even if you lose, when you are arguing publicly, mind you, when you are arguing publicly for any bit of legislation, in so doing, by trying to take the position that says, okay, well, let's go ahead and talk about this from the extreme. Now, anybody else who's willing to take the more moderate approach that still favors your position, they're going to look very reasonable in comparison to you. If you want a real-life example of this happening, look at how much your standard Christian conservative, look at how moderate and how reasonable they look in comparison to our favorite duly elected official, President Trump is. Most of them look much more moderate post-2016 than they did beforehand. And why is that? Because the Overton window has shifted to the right. When you shift the Overton window...
I don't think that it's shifted to the right. I think the Overton window's just gotten wider.
You think that the Overton window's just gotten wider?
Yeah, because like it is... Whereas in like 2000, before Trump, it was weird to talk about before Trump and Bernie.
We live in the pre-Trump era.
The pre-Trump era. Let's talk about the pre-Trump era for a second. It was weird to talk about the stuff that was as far right as what the Trumpians advocate for.
True.
And then it was also weird to talk about socialized healthcare, universal healthcare.
Sure.
But now that this is like part of that effect of like partisanship moving further and further into the extremes, is that both sides have stretched the Overton window out along with it. So we're really just dealing with a bigger Overton window.
So I'm not going to I'm not going to disagree that we are dealing with a larger Overton window, but I would say that Bernie, compared to other countries, the positions that Bernie takes, Bernie has a very centrist-y position in comparison to other countries.
Yeah. I know. I'm talking about for America, though. That's all I'm saying.
Well, everything's relative, and you and I live close enough to Alabama for that joke to stick. But, God, this engineer's going to kill me.
Yeah, sorry.
But that said, I still think and maybe it's just because I talk to people from Japan, from Canada, from Germany, from like literally every other area besides
I don't
the
talk
States.
to anybody. I don't talk to anybody outside of America.
You talk to Shannon and Paul. Don't even. Do they not exist? How could you forget about them?
I just don't.
Sorry. Here's what I'm going to say.
But
hold on, because this is why it's one of the reasons. It's one of the reasons.
Are you okay, Ocean? Ocean, are you okay?
I'm good. Ethan was saying something important.
That's why I don't like always using the Overton model with politics.
Okay.
How can you use it for anything but politics? It's a model constructed for politics.
I'm trying to get there. Hold on.
Okay.
I think there's an Overton window for StarCraft.
I'm not saying that there isn't one, but when we're talking about politics historically, it usually is more about a pendulum swing. And as the pendulum swings more to one side, people fall off of it.
You get the boomers, and then you get the hippies,
and then
you get the pro-bros.
Swing back, and people grab onto it as it goes to the other side. And then as it and then there's too many people on it, and they fall off, and it swings back. I'm not saying that there isn't an Overton window in politics. I'm just saying that I don't know. You see people all the time, people that are like, I voted for Obama, and then I voted for Trump. That's not because a window got wider. It's because a pendulum swung. It's because people argued things better. And over the past 40 years, Republicans have argued things better than Democrats have. Democratic policies are better for the working class. They're better for the agricultural class. They're better for the lower class. They're better for poor people. But Republicans have argued things better in a way that has convinced more people that they fit through that Overton window that has literally nothing to do with them.
This actually makes a little bit of sense if you've ever have you looked into the history of like where conservative thought came from?
Yes.
Jesus was a right-to-work state.
Well,
okay.
Sure.
Look,
I was thinking about John Adams.
And you know what? And you know what happened to Jesus? The Romans fired him. I'm sorry, they laid him off and on a cross, and then he was proceeded to be nailed.
Yeah,
repeatedly.
they nailed him on a couple of things. But go on.
that's why he's so pro-gay. A bunch of Romans nailing him. Anyway, no. So for those in the for those in the class,
something blasphemy.
For those in the chat who don't know, a lot of conservative thought began in France, and it began from what we would now kind of consider upper middle class people who were trying to figure out a way that they could maintain their own power. And the best way they could maintain their own power was by maintaining the current ruling monarch's power, because as far as they were concerned, by maintaining the rule of the monarch, they were able to keep their position in society. So there's this meme we hear about conservatives about how, well, they argue for legislation that favors the rich, thinking that any of them will actually be rich. No, it's not that any of them think they're going to one day be rich and that this legislation that favors the rich is going to help them. It's that legislation that favors the people above them allows that hierarchy to maintain, so the little bit of power they have, they can keep. This is where conservative thought began, and while a lot of people may not realize this is why they hold those positions now, that kind of ends up being the end result is, I can keep my upper middle class lifestyle as long as I'm not being taxed to hell and back where I have to lose that lifestyle, so I'm going to vote Republican so I can lower that.
No. So there's a quote that's usually attributed to John Steinbeck, which he didn't say. Um, he said something similar, but it says, I want to read it. I want to read it directly. Give me just a moment. Socialism never took root in America because the poor see themselves not as an exploited proletariat, but as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. Now Steinbeck didn't say it. Okay, it. Ronald Wright, excuse me, attributed it to him, but probably Ronald Wright said it himself. Just attributed it to Steinbeck to make it more popular. Steinbeck actually talked about temporarily embarrassed capitalists. Seriously, I agree with you. I think the biggest thing that the middle class in France wanted to preserve was their land. It was the same thing that the middle class, the lords, wanted to preserve in Scotland and Ireland.
Yeah, that would be.
They would be essentially what we would call upper middle class here.
Sure. So, and the Enlightenment was really a response to them, and the Enlightenment is what inspired us, right? I read an interesting argument from somebody on Twitter recently that conservatism has been the only political argument ever, which was an interesting argument.
How did they support that take?
I'll get there. He said, so conservatism, the crux of conservatism is laws for thee, but not for me. So it's interesting. I don't agree. I think the Enlightenment was a response to that conservative thought that came out of the lords of Scotland and Ireland and in England. And the Enlightenment is absolutely what inspired Jefferson and Franklin. For those that don't know, Benjamin Franklin was asked to write the Declaration of Independence and refused because he knew it would be edited. Jefferson's original document was edited, I believe, 84 times by the Congress. So there were conservatives, what we would consider conservatives. Many of them was basically South Carolina, who didn't. The original Declaration of Independence said a lot of things about slavery, about international slavery.
South Carolina was just really upset about that idea.
They were. That's how they made their money. They made their money because they owned slaves, and that was.
Excuse me.
Right. And Jefferson wrote in a letter.
Very radical of you there, Mr. Jefferson.
Jefferson wrote in a letter that slavery was like holding a wolf by the ears. You didn't like it, but you dare not let it go.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, but conservatism has always been what it is today, that white male Christians deserve to own land and no one else does. And that everyone should be subservient to those landowners, and that the people who own less land should be subservient to the people that own more land.
I think it's evolved significantly since then. But
I agree.
I think it comes down to did the foundations change?
I don't want to get into just like a huge demonizing of conservatives for the most part.
Right. I'm not even really demonizing. It's just I'm talking about where it came from.
Right. No, and to an extent, yeah, it's like the way that I've seen conservatism largely is that it's a defense of the status quo for the most part. I like the status quo. It works for me. I know how to function in it. I don't want it to change. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And to an extent that plays into kind of the game that you were talking about, where it's like, well, no, I have power. What little power that I have, I'd like to preserve it because change means I'm risking that power.
Sure.
And there's a certain understandable argument to that, where it's like, well, if things change, the little bit of power that I have could go away, and I will wind up in the bottom end of society,
destitute, sure.
where I don't want to be. Thank you very much.
It is almost as if,
especially if there's a system that doesn't work, then I'll wind up down at the bottom.
It's almost as if many conservatives that argue that we don't have a class system, at least like a de facto class system, then also recognize that I don't want to be in the bottom part of that class system that I vehemently deny doesn't exist.
Sure.
I haven't had there. I don't know. I'd have to get into whether or not conservatives deny that there's a class system, because I think that a lot of them accept
Ben
that there's a class
Shapiro,
system.
I've seen him argue that a lot.
Ben Shapiro doesn't think there's a class system?
I got to find the quote.
Real quick. Most conservatives that have the ability to have speaking platforms argue that we're in a form of a meritocracy.
Yes.
And that seems to be and because we are in a meritocracy, we A, don't have a de facto class system, and B, even if we did, you're where you deserve to be. That's where that argument ultimately ends up.
That's not where we're at.
Yeah. But that's the argument. The argument is we're not in a class system, but if we are, you fucking deserve to be on the bottom.
And I've heard that from Shapiro types, and I think that I don't know. I do know some other conservatives that are like, no, this is that wouldn't agree with those kind of statements. That would say, yeah, there's definitely a class system. Yeah, there's we're not that the system that we're in doesn't function completely as a meritocracy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're on a tangent.
It's okay.
But just pointing out, because I know that Cyrus didn't want to be on tangents as much.
Well, it's barely a tangent.
It is barely a tangent. We are kind of like, we're next to the topic.
Sure.
But yeah, it's like conservative rhetoric in the Trumpian age has gotten so off the wall lately because there's this jump to defend Trump that winds up making what we thought was reasonable conservatism 10 years ago comes off as being a reasonable human.
Right. Compassionate conservatives, they used to call themselves. Which,
as W. Bush was that.
Right.
Class.
He was a compassionate conservative.
Yeah, that's and we remember how we felt about that then, and now we have Trump, and people are like, I kind of miss Bush. Like,
I mean, yeah, at least Dick Cheney looks you in the eye when he shoots you in the face.
Does he? I don't know if he did.
He looks right at your eye. So
I just know he has a snarl on his face when he does it.
He always does. That's just his face. He has resting snarl face.
Yeah. Anywho.
Yeah.
Healthcare.
No.
Unfortunately, the conversation's about politics.
Yeah. No, it's true.
Right.
It's true.
The issue is that
the
we're
show
going to have
didn't
to argue
that
it.
way.
And the issue is that we've got to settle on a plan to argue.
Right.
The last time that we tried it, we did Obamacare, which was Romney Care, right? This was Romney's plan. Romney implemented it as governor, and it worked. The entire plan came out of a conservative think tank. Obamacare was supposed to pass because Republicans could stand behind it. And then Obama passed it, and Republicans are like, the fuck is this? Who would want this shit?
Was there a state option under Romney Care?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't recall.
It's like that was like the point of contention is the 2 points of contention. The 2 big points of contention were the public option element of it, which is part of what made it work, and the mandate element of it, which I think was unconstitutional, but still part of what made it work. So
I don't think that it was unconstitutional. I disagree with that.
I have rants about that, but
I know, and I've heard them all, and we won't go into them here.
Yeah, you probably know my basic point because I essentially agree with Justice Kennedy on it.
Okay. So, I mean, we aren't friends anymore, but
okay, so fair enough.
Sure.
That's how I feel about Ocean every other week. When did you start doing this?
But the issue is that we have to figure out a plan to argue. And we have to figure out what the right arguments are, and we have to argue it the same way every time. It's the only way that we're going to pass anything. I guess I don't know. Are we winding down? Should I get into the?
We can get into another thing if it.
Okay.
I'd say we've got about. So I'm going to go ahead and say, because I do have to keep my end of the schedule.
Okay.
We do have about 15 more minutes that we can use.
Okay. So let's get into the question we asked on last night's show was, is it viable?
Right.
So I'm going to have a nice appeal to authority. Paul Krugman is a Nobel laureate.
Fallacy.
In 2008, Paul Krugman won the Nobel Prize for Economic Sciences.
Okay.
He's an economist among economists.
He seems like a valid source.
He's a valid source. He wrote an opinion article in the New York Times on November 1st.
Okay.
He says that Warren's plan is viable.
Okay.
Paul Krugman is has forgotten more about economics than I'll ever know. And he says that her plan seems to work out. He outlines 4 things in her plan. I'll go through these very, very quickly. First, that it will provide savings in overall medical costs. We talked about that, the administrative.
Right.
Second, that it requires employers to repipe their money to Medicare. We already talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Third, that state and local governments would require maintenance of effort, basically requiring that states continue to spend the money that they're already spending. Not spend new money, just the money that they're already spending, they have to continue spending. So that's number 3. And that number 4, they close any further budget holes with taxes on corporations and large fortunes, including an estate tax, which is a tax at death when you inherit certain types of property. And strengthening the IRS. Currently, the IRS says that there are certain tax fraud things that they don't go after because they can't afford it. If a billionaire is cheating on their taxes and can afford hundreds of millions of dollars in lawyers, is it worth it for the IRS to go after them? Currently, it isn't. Warren wants to change that and make sure that large corporations and billionaires who cheat on their taxes the IRS has the resources needed to go after them.
Right. And that makes sense. If you can make it cost efficient to recover those funds, and I think that's part of the game.
Right.
Is that like if it's not cost efficient to recover the funds, now the government has to spend $100 million in order to get $100 million. And we have that whole conversation that we had earlier about spending $30,000 in legal fees to cover a $30,000 medical care cost.
Right.
Like, is it worth it? Right. So
finally, so Krugman doesn't endorse the plan, but he does say that he thinks it's the plan that's got the best chance of passing a Congress.
And then we get into, it's amazing that how opinions change, and I think that both parties are guilty of this. That opinions will suddenly change when it's the other party that's proposing something, because then if something goes through and it works, suddenly it is a accomplishment of that president. And one way that you get a party flip is when the president that is in power has no accomplishments. That if so, failures. For example, if the Democratic House can stonewall Trump, then arguably Trump can have no accomplishments because nothing can get through the House. Therefore, we should have a new president simply on the basis that Trump has got no accomplishments. Obviously, there's more reasons to not vote for Trump beyond just that.
Better say this sounds a lot like what. Forgive me for bringing this up because I see the hat that progressive liberals wearing. But this is very much like the freaking Star Wars Episode 1 vote of no confidence shit that happened with Valorum. This is literally what happened to Valorum, is that he got stonewalled because Palpatine made it a point where the Senate wouldn't let him do anything for his term. And so eventually Amidala was able to just go, okay, no, I have a vote of no confidence in Valorum because he's not able to give any help to my planet because he was barred by his Senate.
E.T. voted for Palpatine.
This a vote for Senator Palpatine.
That's Jar Jar. I said E.T. There's the little E.T. aliens are in the Senate.
Yeah, vote home. Is that what it is?
Yeah, E.T. vote home. Yeah. Beep.
I'm sorry. It's just when you were laying that out, I'm just like, I actually know a fictional universe where this exact strategy was employed.
Well, because it
worked. Order 66 has been said in the chat.
Execute Order 66. Impeach Palpatine.
The issue is that was 62.
What world are we in?
The issue is that that's why we have to have such a good argument. We have to have the right plan and we have to have the right argument, and we have to convince Republicans that. And I'm not talking about Republican lawmakers. I'm talking about Republican people to also push the Republican Party into the same plan.
Right.
I don't know if that's possible or not.
I don't know if it is either. So the thing is that when you get into like massive reforms, right? there was the. Let's take the criminal reform bill as an example. I promise this isn't a tangent. People both sides voted overwhelmingly for that.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
But guess it is now becoming in the election a talking point as an accomplishment for Trump, because people voted for the right decision. But Trump is like, I was president at the time, and I signed this bill,
and he signed it.
Now it's a reform that happened under me. I can claim credit for all the positive effects.
Listen, if Trump came out tomorrow and said, I want to pass Medicare for all, I would support him on it, because I want Medicare for all.
Right.
I want universal health care. I don't give a fuck if it's Trump. I don't give a fuck if it's
Trump's legacy.
Satan himself. Like, who gives a fuck if it's called Trump care? Obama said the same thing. Obama was like, sure, change Obamacare and make it Trump care. I don't care. I just want people to have health care. I don't give two fucks who passes it.
Right.
If Hitler comes back and it's Hitler care.
God damn it.
Would you like to know how we are going to fund the healthcare system?
I think there might be.
There might be an issue. Sure. And I understand that. I don't want it on his accomplishment list.
No.
I think by bringing in that example, you may not have baked your idea so much.
Okay, maybe I went a little far.
That's
my point is.
I think you went about 6 million units too far.
My point is that yes, if Trump were tomorrow to say we want universal health care, we're going to pass Elizabeth Warren's plan, I would be in favor of it. Sure, yes. Yeah. No, I agree. We just need it. We need it.
Speaking of things that we need, and this is the one tangent I'm going to allow us to go on aside from the other million ones we did. Ocean, you really need to check the stream, because that fight that you wanted to happen, it happened.
Wait, what fight? What?
The fight of Moore's Law versus the Invisible Hand.
Did that all happen? Are people having that fight in the chat?
No, look at the stream itself.
Oh shit! I haven't
I haven't
refreshed it. Hold on a second. I'm actually going to need to shut down.
Ocean.
Dude, I got to reboot Firefox, because Firefox is it doesn't handle live videos very well. I don't know why.
It doesn't.
It freaks out on me, and it's just
I think it's some kind of memory thing.
Yeah, it's a RAM issue, I think, but it's just I have buku fucking RAM on my computer.
Right. but Firefox is not a Snorlax. Firefox is an Eevee.
Oh my god, that's amazing. I love the little Pokemon discs underneath them.
What's a Snorlax? What is that? Is that some kind of?
Okay, Boomer.
It's the invisible hand.
Is that a reference? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry. It's the invisible hand and Moore's Law, and what's the other one that we did?
I don't remember what the other one we brought up was. There's Adam's invisible hand. There's Moore's Law, and there's one other.
There's
theory.
One other one.
Oh, value-based.
Labor theory of value.
Yeah, labor theory of value.
Labor theory of value. Oh,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah, I see the invisible hand. I guess labor theory of value is the little time card.
and then I think Moore's Law would be the stats.
Yeah,
on the other
stats
side.
just going insane, and they're just gonna destroy each other.
I am so proud of everyone right now for making that happen. Although I did call for a rap battle. I'm just saying I did say that it needed to be a rap battle, but sorry.
I'm sorry, you can't convince me to.
House.
You can't convince me to rap for you. But if I were to rap, I would rap. I would rap as Moore's Law. Specifically because I could have an argument with myself over whether or not technology improves at an 18-month incremental rate or a 2-year incremental rate.
Oh Jesus! Well, I mean, we do have Notorious PUDDLE here, so
he's got the beanie and everything.
Oh,
he does.
He could do it. Ocean, you could do it.
Y'all need to leave.
We do believe in you.
Oh man!
Smash that like button.
I like it when they call me Big Puddle.
Hit the bell.
That's it. We have 3 minutes left in the show. Is there anything else? Is there anything else you'd like to get into?
Let's plug Progressive Liberal.
He's already in the description.
I understand that, but guys, This guy's got a YouTube channel. He runs a show.
I do. We do a show. I do a show with Mikey Famine 3 nights a week, usually, called the Pro Lib Show, where we talk about political stuff. We had our 25th episode last night.
Sweet.
I got a bunch of pre-edited videos on abortion and immigration and Andrew Yang and stuff. All of our episodes are podcasts. You can find us on iTunes and Stitcher. So if you just want to listen, you don't want to watch, I understand. We try to keep all the episodes at an hour so that they're easier to consume. Follow me on Twitter, because I'm on Twitter all the time at ProLibShow, and I tweet shit.
I feel like that's what people do on Twitter. There's one we don't have any super chats, or we got 0 super chats, and we got 0 bit donations throughout the show, which is unfortunate. But there is at least one question that I wanted to.
We're gonna have to give our audience a talking to.
There is at least one question that I wanted to answer from the chat, and it was, what is Adam's invisible hand? Adam's invisible hand is the idea that improvements in the market happen through self-regulation.
The market will figure itself out.
Yeah, the entire idea, it's an idea proposed by Adam Smith. It's literally just the idea that the market will figure itself out.
And his book is literally called The Invisible Hand.
Yeah. So that's whereas Moore's law is that technology improves at a rate of it gets doubly fast and doubly efficient every 18 months or 2 years, depending on which proponent of Moore's law you're talking to, because none of them can fucking agree on what Moore's law is.
If you want to be a real fucking nerd and read up on The Invisible Hand, you want to get the book The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith.
Or don't.
Or don't.
You can also not do that.
But that's where the theory comes from.
That
if
is
you
where
really want
the
to get
theory
into
comes
it.
from. And then there's the labor theory of labor.
Labor theory of
value
is Capital. By
The labor theory
Karl
of
Marx.
labor that says that your labor, the work that you do has value, has intrinsic value.
And you'll get people, if you start to say that you know about what the labor theory of value is and you don't, you will get someone who yells at you and says, what does CV&S mean? So just look out. Don't start.
Okay. Well, the one super chat that we did get is from Southern Witch. It said, first and only, much love, guys. # Ocean Fangirls.
Oh,
# Ocean Fangirls. That's great.
Well, I too, if my fans are to be believed, I too am also an Ocean Cat fangirl. But I do.
I'm a Neko Ocean girl, actually.
Neko Ocean girl. There's gonna be a water elemental Neko that shows up in the fan art chat.
I hope so.
Remember
in Cirrus's server.
I hope
remember
That's gonna
Ocean.
happen. She's gonna have the bangles and everything.
Yeah.
And a hammer.
Ocean, I just want to go ahead and say that when your avatar climaxes in the multiple fan theories that have probably been proposed between the two of us, as long as my avatar is paying for it, that's an example of trickle down economics.
Well, listen, it's been a great show.
Wow.
I stole that joke from Asriel in the chat.
No, that's good. That's really
wow.
Oh, you know what? Actually, let's spend the next hour talking about trickle-down economics. Okay, so
They don't work. All right, thank you all for watching, and that's what we're gonna end on. Thank you all for coming out today.
take it.